problems.
Odd time of day.
Yes, it is.
We're on here.
Hello.
Good evening, everyone. It is now 5:30, and I'll call this work session of the Burnsville City Council to order. Work session of the Burnsville City Council to order, and our only item on the agenda this evening is our 2019 proposed budget and capital improvements plan. Is it the capital improvements plan? It's both.
It is both.
Yeah.
Tonight, yes.
And presenting this evening is our Finance Director, Kelly Stry. And of course, with the capital improvement is Ryan Peterson, our Public Works Director. And Kelly, are you hitting it off? Dana, are you setting it up, or Kelly's going directly to it?
Kelly go right into it.
Okay, very good. Well, welcome, Kelly.
Yes, tonight we have combined what usually is our presentation split into two work sessions. We've put most everything in tonight's packet, and because the last couple of years that we've not had a lot on the second work session, so incorporating that all together. And then your second work session in November can be for follow-up, feedback, any of that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So that's the plan for this evening.
All right, very good.
You have already had a number of meetings on the budget process. In the gray area are the things you've already done, starting way back in June. And most recently, in October, you heard from all of the departments with very specific presentations about what they do in their departments and how they use their budgets. So today we're talking more on the fund level, high-level overview, property tax level overview of where we are. And then, as I mentioned, the second meeting in November, we'll have really just follow-up discussion, areas you may want us to go further into. And then December 4th is when the council will consider to adopt the tax levies and the budget for 2019.
Okay.
So this wasn't in your, this particular slide was not in the presentation that we had out because we just found out about 2 hours ago.
All right.
Our AAA bond rating
Congratulations.
was affirmed today, which is great.
Dana, Kelly, congratulations.
They even were a couple days ahead of schedule. We didn't expect to hear back from them until Thursday, and they returned it in just a couple of days. So I think that says a lot. We're really happy with that. So they have specific rating criteria for every rating that they do for municipalities, and you can see them up there, how we scored. Their scoring is very strong, is the highest rating that they give in any category, and then strong, those are both good. Adequate is, as described, it's adequate. And then there are ratings below that, which we didn't receive anything ratings below that. But as you can see, Burnsville was noted as a very strong economy, very strong budgetary flexibility. So that has to do with fund balance. So just wanted to point that out. All of your fund balance policies and the decisions that we make, that you make rather, and how we put the budget together, affect that budgetary flexibility. So when we talk about using fund balance, we're talking about using one-time expenditures, not something to lower the property tax levy on an annual basis on regular spending, but something to keep it from spiking in any particular year. And then strong liquidity talks about the cash balance balances that we have, and that was very strong. Strong institutional framework score, that is actually a Minnesota-wide score. So that is how cities operate within Minnesota, and the laws and regulations within the state of Minnesota that allow us to, whether we have flexibility, local control, that sort of thing. So that is a strong institutional framework score. Adequate debt and contingent liability position, there was, the comments that they made was that were historically manageable debt levels, and that was fine. I think that it indicates that we wouldn't want to increase that significantly, and as we have it in our financial plan and in your debt management schedule, we're not having a lot of future large amounts of debt. We would have the fire station out in future years, but that also has planned revenues, so
That's right.
I think that goes to show a good position. And then the last one is that we received adequate in is budgetary performance. And that is how we end up compared to budget at the end of the year. So actual revenues compared to budget. And adequate it's still a good rating. We've come in within budget, and we have provided enough flexibility and conservative budgeting practices within there so that we're not putting ourselves on the line by having, for instance, estimating revenues too high or expenditures too low.
Okay.
So those are good news. That's good news. So where are we today? You set the max tax at 4.9% back in September, and we talked about it in August. We knew at the time about cost pressures due to increasing inflationary pressures, including 1.5% increase over 2 years for police and fire pension contributions, employee COLAs, union contract settlements that have happened during the year. There were a couple that had some market increases that put a little bit of additional pressure on this following year as we make up for that. Health insurance increases, although they came in better than we had planned. So that was, while there's still increases, it's better news than we had planned. We talked a lot about seasonal rate pressures for our seasonal staff, that we are significantly below market there, and so we provided for a factor in there. And then we had a $50,000 liability insurance deductible increase that was to offset premium increases. So those were just some of the things that we were addressing with that 4.9% and continue to have in your budget. We also addressed some unmet IT support needs, which are currently a challenge to using maximum utilization of existing technology, and we factored that into the budget as well. We knew that there were some pressures related to property tax petitions from our commercial properties that are resulting in some higher settlements, reducing property taxes in recent years. We knew we had to deal with that. We didn't know exactly what that number is, and it is a variable number, but we've done some more research on that. So council set a maximum tax of 4.9, but directed staff to try to come in under that 4.9% max increase. At the time, we knew we were going to continue to refine our budget projections for as far as expenditures go, and also as far as revenues go. So we set off in that direction. Building permits and EMS revenues are ones that the projections were increased significantly in your budget book compared to where we were expecting, and those were positive offsets to the property taxes. And past debt refundings also were provided some savings for property tax adjustments. So those were all good news. However, during that same time, we received some new information. As you all know, the anticipated decline in the landfill host fees came with new projections that accelerated that decline over as soon as starting in January of 2019. So that presented us with a big challenge of about $540,000 annually for the next 3 years. Additionally, property tax petition trends indicated that we needed to increase that allowance for property tax for uncollected taxes by about $200,000 annually. And that is just facing realities, nothing we have control over. Those are set by the courts as they come in, and it is something that we had for a couple of years thought was an anomaly, and then became a trend, and now we thought perhaps it would decline. It really doesn't look like it's declining. It looks like it's leveling out, but that is a need. We're going to just have to create an allowance for that. What has happened in the past couple of years is we've used some fund balance for that, or savings in other areas, really offsets the savings in other areas. It's one of those things that has contributed as we look back at what Standard & Poor's said about our budgetary performance. It's one of the things that goes into that number is a little low. So something we did want to address. So we adjusted financial plans, and that is the beauty of doing your 5-year financial plans. We had anticipated some things. We have a plan that's out there that allows us flexibility and to really be able to respond to challenges like this, because we know what it's going to do to us over the future. We can see not just a knee-jerk reaction, do this for this one particular year, but what does that do to us for the next few years as we look out there. Host fees had been something that we had been anticipating, but not just at the same level or as fast as that. So we were prepared, and we did a swap of revenues between the general fund and the facilities fund. So in the facilities fund, there was an $800,000 property tax levy, and that's a capital projects fund that has some flexibility on timing and other revenue sources. So we moved that property tax into the general fund, and the general fund had $1 million of host fee that had been in the budget. We moved that revenue to the facilities fund. Okay. So it was a swap. It's not exactly equal, but it does help the general fund because the general fund has very regular expenditures. Those are annual, ongoing expenditures, and we would like the revenues in the general fund to be more consistent and steady revenues. And in the capital project funds, we can take a little bit of timing differences. We can take our time to make up that revenue more easily because we can adjust the timing of capital expenditures. So that was helpful. We also moved funding of the roof replacement at the old garage. That was being incrementally funded from the general fund through the youth center and then on to the facilities fund. We just moved that funding to the facilities fund, and so that reduced a transfer expenditure in the general fund. And then that still left some shortages for us. So it's all the departments went back to their budgets. Every single department had some adjustments that they made to their budgets, and looking at trying not to affect service levels as much as possible, to re-examine estimates and that sort of thing. So we did make some adjustments there. To fill, that still left a gap. To fill the remaining gap and achieve a small savings from the max tax, as the council had wished, we were able to reduce that tax increase to 4.7. We implemented a phased approach to 2 items. That would be the tax petition allowance. We phased that in over 2 years. So this year we're providing for a $100,000 allowance and increase, and then the next year another $100,000. And then we phased in also the implementation of the insurance deductible of $50,000, so $25,000 this year and $25,000 next year. This is a less conservative approach to these types of projections than we would normally take. So both these items, though, are highly variable. It is unknown if we will have $200,000 worth of property tax petitions, but it is also, quite possible. So if it reaches the $200,000 limit, or level, then you would be spending $100,000 of fund balance effectively this year, and then building up your allowance next year. The insurance deductible is another one. That one, we raised that deductible. We don't know that our claims will reach that level. And so this gives us a year to see where those claims are. If they reach the 25 or more, then we would increase that a second time the next year. It does mean that if both of those items go more or less, I should say less favorably than planned, that mean dipping into reserves further than planned. Council could decide to set the final tax levy back at the max tax levy at 4.9%, and you would be able then to increase the tax petition allowance by $68,000. That would get you to almost the $200,000. So instead of $100,000 increase this year, it'd be $168,000 increase, and really is quite close to our estimates. That would then lessens the chance of you having to dip into reserves for 2019. This would not change any spending. It doesn't say we're going to spend anymore. Those tax petitions are going to happen whether we plan for them or not. We don't have any control over that. It wouldn't change any spending, but it would increase the tax levy by that 0.2%. For the median value home, that means about $2 a year. Okay. And then if tax petitions don't come in as unfavorably as they come in more favorably, or we have savings in other areas, that allows you fund balance for next year's tax levy to provide for one-time expenditures. So it helps you. I mean, I think that in a 2-year framework, you're looking at really the same amount of money for a small amount to the effect on the median valued home of about $2 annually. So that would be staff's recommendation. We did present the 4.7. It would be staff's recommendation that the 4.9 is more in line with the financial policies that you have on the conservative nature.
That was my question, if you're going to make a recommendation, and you did, thank you.
Yeah.
And I would go on record to increase.
To go to 4.9?
Correct. I had conversations with Dana about the conservative way and what the risks were, and if you don't do it, suddenly there's some percentage chance that you'll have a shortfall in the middle of next year, and you'll have to come back and increase the budget. I see, again, in a serious conversation, it's more of a truly realistic figure. As much as I hate ever raising anything of any dollar, but it's based on my conversation with Dana, that's the 4.9% is a much more real, true number. And the other one, it sounded like there was a good, the way things were going, there'd be a good chance. Otherwise, you're going to be visiting it next June to raise the money.
Well, I think it also meets what the rating agencies also talked about, the flexibility in our budgetary, and so that they know that we can pay for things. And if this is only $68,000, that's going to give us a hit. I agree with Bill. Let's make sure that we don't get that kind of a hit. Yeah. Did you have a comment? Yeah, sure.
Well, we all had the same meeting with Dana, and I hadn't really decided one way or another, but the way it was laid out, there was a substantial increase in risk.
Yeah.
And there was a hit to some summertime staff.
Yep.
And mowing. And so we're looking at 0.2% to show up in visible evidence of some cuts that may be going deeper than what we would in any other given situation. And so what's really the motivation to go from 4.7 to 4.9 or 4.9 to 4.7? In most budget years in the last 12 that I've sat through, 2/10 doesn't really mean anything in visible cuts or visible services. And maybe there's more there that could be found, but this, because of the $500,000 surprise, is a pleasant surprise that they were still going after some cuts to be able to get that down from 4.9. You know, $500,000 is what, 1.5 points roughly?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, you know,
And
we,
this is
instead of
2/10.
talking about 3 point something, we're stuck pressing the roof close to 5 or 4.9. So it kind of, that change in the host fees really blew my idea for trying to reduce our levy. But we have some more discussions to go through. But I can't disagree, Councilmember Coughlin. I mean, it's tough. It was just the kind of cuts that you thought to yourself, okay, so we're gonna cut back on mowing. We're gonna have some visible maintenance issues, and it's for this. It's like it wasn't necessarily the ideal situation.
And I do not want to go back and weed the medians.
But it's in
like-
your job description, chief
Yeah.
weed inspector.
And I did
Maybe
that
not
for
puller,
2 weeks
but
to make
inspector.
sure that it was, yeah, we cut all of that stuff. Yeah, no, but this is, and I agree with Will, I mean, 0.2%. And it also, given what you just reported with regard to the strength of the ratings, I don't want to take a hit on that AAA bond rating for that kind of flexibility.
I agree.
Okay.
And I remember when we quit mowing one year.
Yeah, and
Not very
I'm
good
the
stuff.
one who went and,
Yeah, that was a different time.
yeah, that was.
You were here during that.
Yeah, it was, yeah, that was when we went through all of those cuts and then I mean, it was just really bad to cut spraying, and then we got weeds, and we have people coming into town for the fire muster, and the weeds were taller than me.
I do want to clarify, there are still those kinds of things that departments offered up. As I mentioned, everybody went back to their budgets and they offered up some of those things, and one of them was a reduction in that increase we said for seasonals that we needed. We did reduce that, and, you know, hopefully what we'll find is we'll still be able to, with an increase, we'll still be able to find enough staff, and, you know, that may be a phased-in thing as well, so.
Yeah.
You're saying
Yeah,
you want to
Dan.
reduce the pay for seasonal?
No, there would
No.
probably be fewer, so.
Fewer.
Fewer workers.
high, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
And
Isn't that question the other question you want to ask? Don't we have to increase our rate for seasonals because we're $2 to $3 below all the cities
Yeah.
around us,
Well-
and we're struggling to get help?
and we are losing help because we've heard from people who live here and they're sending their kids to work in Egan because they get better money.
My
Yeah,
recollection is that we're gonna put $100,000 for an increase in seasonal pay, and we dropped it down to 75.
yes,
So so the season will still be able to have a better chance at attracting them, but, you know.
yeah,
it's
we're
just-
competing between Apple Valley and Egan, how much they pay more than we do,
Right.
yeah.
So, no, we are not trying to reduce their pay, just we'll have a little less.
Just making sure we weren't heading that direction.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
but it'll be
Okay.
a phased-in kind of thing
Yeah.
if we need to.
Does the 100 give you any ability to raise the wage offered to get at least a little closer than $3 from some of these cities, or $2?
Yes.
Yeah.
That is the full goal, but
Well, it's
Yeah.
better. I mean, we can complain all we want about what the neighboring cities are doing, but the problem is it's like a free market
That's
force
right.
that we can't control, and we already have a tremendous labor shortage and unemployment rate, and
Mm-hmm.
now we're compounding it by being behind on a competitive wage. And so I'm thankful that we get, quite frankly, I'm surprised and thankful that we get the people we get willfully accepting a couple bucks less than they could get at another city to work here, because they love working for Burnsville.
Well,
And there's some
because the
value
other
in that. It's
cities
not all about
already
the
are
dollars.
have met their seasonal help, so they're taking us as,
So we're the last resort, is that what
Yeah.
you're saying? Yeah, I mean, there is a, wage at that age is unfortunately the biggest driver. I mean, quality of work, the people you work with, where you work, that plays more into an older generation, who's who's at a different time in their life, salary in their life. But when you're 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, it's about, if I can work for this city and mow lawns or this city, if this one's gonna pay me $250 more,
Yeah.
I'm going here,
Yeah.
period. I don't really
Yeah.
care about the equipment they have
Yeah.
and how great the city is. Unfortunately, that's,
Paying the
Okay.
college bills is,
Yeah.
a lot for
it's
a
all
lot of
about
them.
Yeah.
the wage.
okay. Kara, did you have any comments or not?
For me, whether it's 4.9 or 4.7 is moot.
Yeah.
It still
Yeah,
stinks.
It is, it's
Yeah.
$68,000, it's, yeah.
So,
Okay, Kelly?
All right. Oh, go ahead. Oops. Just a couple slides here on how that affects the taxpayers. We've got property tax rate would decrease, and it would still decrease with the additional amount that you were talking about too. So the rate, because the market values have increased, our property tax rate would be going down slightly. The
Not bad.
increase or decrease to an individual property taxpayer really depends on the individual change in market value to that. I say this every year. We have a median valued home, and that value went up about 7%. As you look at individual properties, that it isn't 7% across the board. In
right.
fact, you'd be hard pressed to find
Yeah.
the average.
Yeah.
Or properties that arrive at the average. Some are lower, some are higher. It really is all over the board. There's a little bit of median value increase just due to homes that have been added on the high end of the property spectrum too, on the ones that have been built recently. So I have a slide in the future here that shows that median value increase, but it's to be taken with a bit of a grain of salt, but that is how we compare. So the focus for council is on the actual dollar amount of the levy, because that is what you can control. You can't necessarily control what happens to an individual property tax. This is the historical property tax rate. And what has happened over the year. I will have to get back to you on the 2015. That looks like an anomaly. I'm not sure my chart is correct on 2015 because that did go down. But as you can see, 2018 and 2019, we've dropped the rates. So that is good. Oh, I think 2015 was
Yeah,
decertification.
tip
Yeah.
two. That's what I
Yes.
thought. It's funny how that has a really positive impact on the tax rate.
Yes.
When a TIF district
And the
decertifies.
facilities,
Yeah.
the franchise,
Yep.
Well, that wasn't 2015, it was, TIF two decertified,
Yeah,
that 1.2 million we dumped
yeah.
in roads, but it really had a nice positive effect on
decertification, yeah.
Yep. So
lowering our
that
tax
is-
rate.
And then this is where median valued homes have been going over the past several years. So just to show you that the market values of the median value home is going up every year. And as you know, as we've presented in earlier presentations, lots of charts for you on market values, commercial versus residential. The residentials have increased at a faster rate than commercials. Commercials have remained very flat over the same period of time, so there has been a tax shift between commercial and residential. And then this is our usual chart on that average, on the average homes, actually the median valued home, which now in Burnsville is at $254,800.
Dan has a question.
Okay.
This seems to be a consistent story for the last, I don't know how many years, where every year, $1 million commercial property has gotten a reduction
Yep. And it
because of the market forces, obviously. And go back many, many years, it
Yeah.
was the other way around. But do you have any idea of how many years commercial property owners have gotten a reduction in city taxes as a
Quite a
result
It's
of
years.
quite a
a lot
few.
of
quite a
things?
few years.
Like going back to
And
maybe the recession?
residentials have been carrying
Yeah.
the businesses, the commercial property.
Well, you go back more than 5 or 6 years ago when property values were barely growing.
Yeah.
Even then,
Yeah.
where residential really
Residentials
wasn't
were
growing that
carrying-
much,
yeah.
commercial was still getting a credit, basically
Yeah,
getting a
that's right.
benefit.
Yeah, and it's many years, as far as I know, too.
Yeah. So we've been, I don't know if it's us doing it, but we've been really good to our commercial as far as delivering the same services for less money year after year after year.
Yeah.
Yep. And it does, again, individual properties with their value changes will have different, but the commercial properties are more consistently close to the zero
Yeah.
increase market value wise than where the residentials, I would say the range of variances is much wider, where the commercials are very flat.
Dan?
While we're having this discussion, I think it's important to say on camera that, because when we went through this, when we went through the recession, and, we made massive cuts in '09 and '10,
Yeah.
that resulted in 20 full-time people, positions eliminated, $4.5 million over a 2-year savings in the budget. But still, people would come in and say, we're in a recession. My home value is going backward, and you're saying my tax bill for the city is going up, even if it was $2 or $3 a month. Why is it going up when my home value is going the other way? Now we're in a better situation where their home value is increasing at 7%, and their tax bill is not going up anywhere near 7%.
That's right.
And so we're not hearing those concerns anymore, but it's sort of the other side of a recession when we're in prosperous times, and we're still containing, minus the $500,000 surprise, we're still doing a pretty good job containing costs, and we have, and that's reflected in our tax rate. But market forces are driving their value of their home up. And so hopefully they'll remember that when it starts going the other way again. Because usually everything that goes up comes down a little.
Okay,
So it's not, the statement I want to make is we're not in control of the market forces.
that's right.
That, and I wanted to put it in the context of some of those complaints that we only control the cost of the city government. We don't control the value of your house. And those two don't go hand in hand. Right?
And there also is a time lag on that. Those valuations are set, they're actually from
That's right. 2-year lag.
last
Yeah,
year,
2-year
so.
It's a 2-year lag.
Yeah, that was, the first 2 years of recession was fun, when the home values kept, the assessed value kept going up, even though the market, retail value of the market was going reverse quite fast.
Okay. Kelly?
Okay. So this chart shows you the revenue split for the entire city, the city budget, all funds. And it shows you that we get about a third of our revenues from property taxes, another portion from intergovernmental bond proceeds and transfers and other types of revenue. But we get another approximate third, I don't know what percentage that is, actually a little bit more than a third, from fees and charges that you set. And within your budget document, you have a whole section on fees and charges.
Yeah.
And we've gone through those fees, and you have in your financial management plan, you have policies that guide us in setting those fees. So you can see in your budget document what the fee was for 2018 and what's being proposed for 2019. The biggest portion of those, so I've pulled out the block, the purple block into that
Yeah.
to that rectangular
That's
area,
good.
so you can see what makes up what things are fees. So the majority of those are in your enterprise funds, your utility fees. And we do
Water.
the utility rate study. So we develop those budgets that you have in your document for the water and sewer fund and the stormwater fund, and come up with a long-term plan for those fees, and those fees for water and sewer are increasing 4.5%, which is as planned, and
Is
has
the
been.
facilities in that enterprise fund as well?
No, the facilities are not. Facilities are capital, so
Yeah.
those would actually be, well, your yes, actually the franchise fees,
because-
yes.
Because
Franchise
you've got
fees
your
in the
water,
blue.
your stormwater, and then now we have that,
The utility franchise fee is in the blue?
The utility franchise fees are in the rectangular section
Yeah.
towards the bottom.
Yeah, in that blue, sorry.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
dark blue that, with
The dark
lodging.
blue.
yeah,
Lodging
franchise
taxes,
fees
right.
and lodging tax.
So we know the franchise fee is 1.2 million, so there's 1.5 million in lodging?
Lodging
No.
and then also cable.
Oh, that's in there too, gotcha. Cable franchise fees, all right. I didn't think the lodging budget was that big.
No, it's not.
It's about
It's
400,000.
about.
Yeah, it's a much smaller
only
piece of that.
about,
In
300.
fact, I think it's exactly 400,000.
Yes,
This graph illustrates something that I heard on the campaign trail. Comments by people, mostly all compliments about controlling the city cost and keeping a clean city. And I mean, there was just really a lot of great positive things about, from people who've lived here for 2 years to 35 or 40 years. But one comment that would kind of eke out now and then was a complaint about our fees. And they'd say, yeah, you know, Burnsville likes its fees, or I'm a little, the fees seem high in this city. And I happen to be a little bit more of a fee-based type of
but which
philosophy.
fees were they talking
but-
about?
Well, it's pretty easy to see. It's in that green block. As you said, it's the water, it's the storm water, and those are the ones. And this is what I would say in return is that's all gone to services, and that is services to clean up the water, to clean up the lakes, to clean. So there was a and I reflect back. It started 20 years ago. I don't know how many years ago, but it was close to 20 years ago when the city led the state, well ahead of when the state made the move to impose some fees to clean up waters and legacy fund and other things. But and I said, we've had a couple of lakes come off the impaired waters, so yes, we have very high, by comparison, stormwater fees. Although by today's standards, maybe it's not so high because everybody else has had to come on board where we had already gone. So they, I at least could correlate high stormwater fees, maybe high water fees, to a water treatment plant, to doing the right thing by recycling the water from the mining, to cleaning up all the lakes, and say it's, it's a fee for a specific outcome. It wasn't, it didn't go into bigger government. It went into specifically to clean up the water and clean up the lakes. And some of it probably had something to do with the water treatment plant expansion and some other things. So a lot of infrastructure and then environmental cleanup. But it was something I heard several times that they noticed when they would move from other cities, or they would talk to friends that lived in other cities, that our fees, stormwater fees and other things were, higher than what they believe they should be, put it that way. But so most of them at the end of the conversation would at least understand where the money was going and felt a little bit better about it. May not have
You
agreed
can
with
see
it, but
and you can see results.
yeah, that's true. You could. I mean, it's very visible.
I think with the stormwater fees too, it is a matter of age of the infrastructure. So it makes a difference on a newer city versus one where we were at the age where some of that infrastructure
Need to be replaced.
didn't go in at the same quality or the same standards, because it's older, and then it had gotten to the point where it needed to be replaced. So that
Well, I
is one of the
remember
factors
when
on the
we
stormwater.
When we redid the Burnsville Parkway, and we had to pull out all of that old infrastructure underneath and replaced it, if you all remember that. And then we had to redo the one coming up on Pleasant the following year.
We replaced the big 36-inch water main.
That's right.
Yep.
All of that. So all of this has a cost. It's a capital cost. Yeah.
And then
Okay. Kara, you had a question? Oh, okay. Yeah.
also with the water and sanitary sewer being user-based, you
That's
have
right.
control over how much you use. So
Yeah.
that
When you
is
turn on that faucet,
a
you're going to
more-
have to pay for it to be discharged out. So that,
Or if you own a vacant lot, commercial lot, you'll pay fairly stiff stormwater fee bill every month, even though there's nothing on your property but grass. And I had to explain that to someone, that that's part of the money that's went in to clean up the waters and the lakes, and and they
It's still a
didn't
runoff.
understand it because it was
It's
a
still a
blank.
runoff
Yeah,
that's
and it's
going
based on square footage and the
someplace.
size, and
Yeah.
and so they, they were just wondering, why am I paying such a large amount on a lot that's just grass right now? There's no runoff because there's no impervious surface, basically.
Yeah, Ryan.
And this area is one area where we do have debt service. We have sold bonds in the past, so part of the 4.5% increase is required to pay off the bonds
Yeah.
that we have out there to conduct those infrastructure improvements.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. One other thing I wanted to mention is that we did implement, as you directed, the sidewalk snow plowing fee.
Yeah.
So that is has moved into the general fund as a fee, but we eliminated the sidewalk snow plowing
Yeah.
fund. So this is an overall view of the city's budget. So in the top bar is the total budget, and those are quite small little numbers, but the total uses are 106 million and the total sources are 97 million. The difference there is mainly in your capital and debt service funds, because there are funds available from there's a timing difference in when the revenue sources come in versus the projects that happen. So when you look at your 5-year financial plans, and we do that on a fund by fund basis, that'll show you where your sources and uses, where you're using fund balance. So we do strive to have a balanced budget, and we even though it would appear that the sources are not as big as the uses, they are in a long-term financial plan type of view of that, and that's why you do a 5-year financial plan.
Yeah. Dan?
Is this a new, it seems like this has been in previous, but maybe not in a chart the way you've done it this year.
This is a new chart.
Is it typical every year, because of what you just spoke of, that there can be as much as a $8 or $9 million difference between? I mean, this is looking at a P&L,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
Our expenses are about $9 million higher than our revenues. But in a governmental organization with all of the enterprise funds, and it's a private business doesn't necessarily have a lot of enterprise funds just full of money sitting there, right? That is being used over a long period of time.
And as you look fund type by fund type there, you can see that a good portion of that is in the enterprise funds and capital projects funds. So again, where we have the revenue source available from a fund balance use, so we're judicious use of fund balance to keep those project costs.
Yeah.
or
But
fund
if
those
you look at
project
the
costs.
general fund, it's very,
Very close.
very close.
Yes.
That's the tax part of it. Yeah.
Just a quick follow-up, so for people watching too, it would seem that this would not be sustainable if you always have several $1 million in uses against your sources. How does this, just so people can understand that this is okay, because it just doesn't look okay to the average person, how is this sustainable over a long period of time? I mean, is it feasible that even though we have these balances, how does the balances always carry a deficit like this? Because at some point it can't, right? The funds run out. So are there years where these will line up and even go the other way, where sources will exceed uses?
Oftentimes it's the actual source comes in higher than what we planned for. So that has provided us something that we can use this year from a previous year. The capital projects, they are each individual year or each individual project is balanced. So when you're presented a project, it's all balanced. They cover a number of years. So sometimes we will get the source in before the use, or it's a timing issue in the capital projects. But each and every capital project has specifically identified sources that are accounted for. And I think when we look at the enterprise funds, we could provide some more information on that for you at the next one. Very
Maybe more of a,
specific.
and it could go backward, really. You could just take it, this year backwards, 10 years or 15 years, and see where that evolution of that fund balance goes. Because again, net, all the timing issues, all that, in theory, logic would say, well, you can't continue to spend more than you take in forever, because those fund balances are getting fed somewhere. So unless the fund balances are part of the source, they're getting drained if you're always spending more than your sources are coming in.
Yeah.
Right? So what does it look like over a longer period of time? And that might help fill in the blanks on how it makes sense for looking at a year like this, that 9 million is, or 8 or whatever it is okay. Right?
And the value of that is why we have a 25 cap plan. We're always looking at 5 years, but behind the scenes, Ryan, you and your folks are always looking 25 years out.
15.
15 and 20, yeah, okay.
Yep.
So when Steve was here, we talked about a 25-year. So you always got that much, but we're always looking at a 5-year. And so we understand
He
what
didn't
needs
share
to
that
be
chart
done.
with you?
Well, Madam Mayor, just for clarification, Steve always, at least to my knowledge, always talked about 15.
15.
I mean, that's still obviously 3 times longer than the 5 that's shown here,
Yeah.
because that's, to go too much further than that is, really getting to the crystal ball.
Yeah,
Trying to do that.
but looking at, when we're looking at our infrastructure, we know, because you all say, well, that street's not going to be built for another 5 to 10 years to get reconstructed. But at the same time, we're also looking at all of the stuff underneath the ground.
Absolutely, yep. And then the value of the 15-year plan is, it allows us to have the flexibility we talked about in the AAA
Yep.
bond range. So this year, when the Lakeville streets are, we're gonna be working with Lakeville on the streets down there, we're
Yep.
able to kind of shift stuff around and have that flexibility that Kelly talked about.
You know,
with our bond
Lakeville
rating.
doesn't want to have that partnership.
With the plowing, yes,
Yeah.
that's a totally
They say
different
they
discussion.
have a lot more work that they have to do, and they're saying, well, we're not gonna do the partnership next year.
They're not very good partners.
Yeah, Dan?
Well, just to your point, I remember Steve saying that, and I think what he was saying is we really manage a very closely manage a 15-year plan, but they look out, because when you put a road in,
Yeah.
it's gonna have a 30-year life, but there's stages along the way. So I think he said we understand what's coming into the 15-year further out, even up to 30 is what I heard him say.
Yeah.
But what is truly managed in a plan that is more documented and closely managed is that from 15 years in.
Right.
Type of
Yeah.
thing, so.
Okay. Kelly?
Okay. This just shows you in a little bit different way what percentage is in the general fund versus the enterprise fund, and then the capital, and then you can see debt and special revenue are a small slice of that. So in the general fund, you can see from this chart where our sources of funds are compared to the prior year. So you can see property tax is the largest portion within the general fund and has a little bit bigger increase this year than normal, and that is the shift from the facilities fund into the general fund that I talked about. So we moved $800,000 from the facilities fund into the general fund of annual property tax revenue. Charges for services, so the green is
2019.
this year, and the yellow is last year. So charges for services actually went down, and that's because the landfill host fee moved out of the general fund and into the facilities fund. And then we had some other offsetting. The EMS fees are up pretty significantly, and we started sidewalk snow plowing fees in this fund as well. And then you can see licenses and permits are up slightly. Intergovernmental is down, and that would be the SAFER grant ending. And then you can just see the other things are very small in comparison to to those revenues, streams that I'd already mentioned.
Okay, Dan?
The second point there moved 807,000 from property tax revenue, of property tax
property.
revenue from facility fund. Can you just clarify what?
So, in the facilities fund, we had a property tax levy that and franchise fees. Those are your major
Two
revenue
sources that went into
sources.
that,
Two
right?
sources.
So we took that property tax levy that was in the facilities
Yeah.
fund and moved it to the general fund.
Yep.
And from the general fund, we took the host fees
Host
and
fee.
moved it to the facilities fund. So we swapped revenues.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And we did that because the property tax levy is a consistent revenue source in the general fund that provides those consistently
For
occurring
operations.
expenditures in the general fund. So that we can count on that to provide police and fire and those things, those services that we need. In the capital fund, we put the host fees, which is a decline, but it also is more volatile. So we don't know exactly what that revenue decrease is going to be next year. We have estimates from the landfill, and that could change. And as you consider the expansion of the landfill, then that revenue source could go back up. And it's just a fund that can look to a longer horizon than the general fund. So that is. It also has franchise fees as a revenue source in that fund. So that fund has options you could consider in 2019 to consider raising franchise fees. You could consider changing expenditures. You could, as I said, you're considering whether the host fee will change or the expansion of the landfill, then those host fees would go up. And so that presents a whole different picture for that fund.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
Thank you.
the general fund, this is looking at the expenditure side of the general fund, and the general fund, as I mentioned, is much service-based. And
all
so
service.
you're looking at personnel costs of being 72% of what happens in the general fund and 25% being current expenditures. And then there's some transfers to other funds. Those are some funding of some of the other funds in your plan. You'll see those as transfers in those particular funds. In order to affect a cut in services or a cut in property tax revenues in the general fund, it really would go to personnel. And the majority of that personnel is also in your public safety and public works and
Yep.
parks maintenance and those kinds of direct services to the public.
Yep, we are a service organization.
And-
The only product we produce is water.
A safe city is a product. Clean city is a product.
Yeah.
Service.
But that's a service.
Yeah, I know.
So when we look at use of fund balance within the general fund, we have a couple sources of fund balance. So when we collected host fees in the past, there was a restriction on some of those host fees to be spent on particularly on landfill abatement activity, which is things like our recycling program, mainly recycling programs, sustainability kinds of programs. So that balance, we specifically look at how much we spend in those programs, and we allow for that to be funding that. And this is one of those things that won't go on forever because we're not collecting any more of those
Yeah.
kind of host fees. That was in the past. They were actually tipping fees in the past, and those were the ones that were restricted. The host fees we collect now are not restricted, so they're not going in there. So this is a finite pot of money. It's off the top of my head, it's less than $2 million. So we are careful about what we draw down from there, but it is appropriate to draw down from there for the next several years. So the sustainability fund transfer and general fund support of that is about 147,000. Last year you implemented recycling in the parks, is 18,200. So we continued that this year, funding that through this, from this fund balance. And then we did not put anything in for the trash enclosure at Nicollet Commons and the Ames Center. That's to be determined based on the project that's coming forward. It's possibly 100,000 or something a little bit more than that. We did not put in either the expenditure or the use of fund balance. So when that particular project comes forward, that will be a budget amendment, and it will add both the use of fund balance and the expenditure.
Okay. Yeah.
One
and-
point, how many years do we have left before that fund is, the old tipping fund is empty?
At this rate,
Yeah,
like 10.
yeah.
Years, okay, so it's 10 years down the road, but when that time comes, the council would be faced with essentially saying, if you want to continue to do recycling in the parks and provide these, now this fund is dry, you got to fund it from somewhere else.
I would anticipate as you got closer to that, we would take a phased approach of
Yeah.
that as well.
And that
So-
has been our practice in other areas. Take a phased approach.
Yes, meaning not phase it out, but phase in different
It-
financial support to continue it,
Yeah.
Yeah, if you wanted to continue.
if they chose to do
Yeah.
it.
If you chose to continue, we would roll in, maybe over 2 to 3 years, 4 years, something like that, of general fund portion of the support.
We'll have to remember that in 10 years. We're going to be,
I'll remember it for you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay,
or 8 years.
And the other option for the, back to this, the other option for this fund balance is to use it on other types of those kinds of activities. So if you had a particular big project, but again, knowing that it's finite, and then that would mean that at some point in time, to continue these operations, you would have to
yeah,
roll them into the
Yeah.
general fund.
And it's strictly recycling and,
Yeah.
trash recycling, cleanup is generally speaking the restrictions.
it's things that are also in our
landfill.
sustainability plan that has to do with all of that recycling, reuse.
It pays the fees to the sustainability man's agent and licensing fees.
Luckily, that portion is very inexpensive.
Yeah,
We get donations from a lot of different
Yeah.
areas, right?
yeah.
It's a fictional character. All right, so then we go on to the use of the unrestricted fund balance, and we have your Ice Center debt service plan that was 10 years of funding a portion of the Ice Center. We're continuing that. It's just a portion of the Ice Center debt, so even though next week you'll be selling bonds to refund that, this is still part of the funding plan for those refunded bonds. And then the comp plan update, you did for a couple of years. The comp plan update, this is an implementation, the 165, as we look at County Road 42. There's some expenditures in the community development area that are one time, again. One could argue that since they have been occurring every few years, they aren't one time, but I think if you look at them in the, they still qualify as that one-time expenditure because it's not something that's going to be ongoing after this particular thing. So, and again, if they don't spend the whole 165, it just remains in fund balance. So that's that.
What-
And then
Yeah.
Could I just ask
Yeah.
just examples of what that 165 is going to
County
fund?
Road 42 study.
Oh, that's so that's what
Part of the study
we're really
and-
already doing that now, but we're not going to pay for it in 2018. You said some of that's going to roll into
I
2019.
think there's some, it's part of that Burnsville, I'm not exactly sure that, but we can have Ms. Faulkner,
There
get
is-
back to you on that.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's 195 this year, and then it's rolling another 165. So total, we're going to spend 360,000 on the BV Center, County Road 42.
No, comp plan,
Oh, I'm sorry, I was reading the line
Comp
below,
plan,
sorry, yeah.
yeah.
Comp plan was
Comp plan.
195 this year. Are we spending
Yeah.
anything on the County Road 42 Burnsville study in 2018?
We are.
I would assume we were
Yes.
because
Yeah.
we're
and I
effectively
think, did
getting
we
services now.
approve the consultant fee at 127 or something? Dana?
That's exactly right, Madam Mayor.
Yeah.
120, it was $117,000 for the study itself, and then some incidentals not to exceed that
Yeah.
amount. So 120, additional
Yeah.
amount, so
Because
127.
I remember that number. So that
Is
is
that gonna
for
fall
the
in 2018?
consultant.
So,
That was in
It's all
what, in,
2018,
yeah,
okay.
2018.
Then the 165 in 2019 is what you'd said you'd get back with more
we can
details,
get
like
specifics.
roughly what is that going to be spent on?
I think Jenny can fill us in on what 165 is.
Just a high level, I
Sure.
don't need any details.
We can do that. And the 2018 is the budgeted numbers for it, and I know that their projections for 2018 were much lower. So even though that says 2018 budgeted 195, in our plan, as we show what the estimates are for that year, I think it's more like 100, and the number that Dana was just
Or
mentioning.
127?
120, yeah, 120,
Yeah.
something like that, so that's coming in more positively, so it doesn't actually get used. But what I wanted to show you here is what you budgeted for in 2018 versus what
19,
you're
right.
budgeting for in 2019.
Do you know how much of that 195 was actually the comp plan update? Was it just residual sort of, I mean, the majority of it I think, took on in 2017, but was there just a small amount of residual expenses related to the comp plan that fell into that
I
195
think
number?
the total comp plan was about 300 and something, if I remember that amount, because we started in 2017. So there was a portion of it in 2017 and a portion in 2018. Ryan?
Which 2018 was active in comp planning as well.
So any idea how much of the 195 is going to comp plan versus the County Road 42?
Can we
can't
get
tell you
back to you
number.
on all the specifics on that? I think that would.
I like to
We-
ask
I could-
questions that can't, no, stump the presenter, that's what that'd be fine, that's more than fine. I want to get a handle on how much is ultimately going to be spent on, I know 127, so we know what the County Road 42 deal is, a max of 127. And then, so what's the 165 next year, and then what comp plan ended up taking up a portion of that 195?
Yeah, see if I had my budget book, I could answer that question on how much we spent, but it sticks in my head that for the whole comp plan,
Yeah, you almost have to go
Because
back
we
to
had
2017, find out what we did spend,
2017
and then,
then
back out the
2018, because
rest.
we had all of those meetings with the stakeholder groups, all of the writing and everything.
Yep, so
Yeah,
it's a
I
very
remember
expensive
because
process.
I read the whole thing,
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Ray.
and we had some problems. We had some problems with the public works portion because a consultant wrote it.
That can occur from time to time. But yeah,
Yeah.
we're in a good place on it.
Yeah, good.
Okay.
Did I cause you to skip over the last item, the budget amendment and one-time
Oh,
expenditure?
yes, you're right.
Sorry.
I got excited. The last item is the police mobile radios. So that is $400,000. That's doesn't occur very often, and it was really a big blip in our equipment and vehicle fund. So we identified that as a reasonable use of fund balance.
Because it's a one-time,
One time.
yeah.
Just to
And-
inquire, some years ago, we did the 800 megahertz massive upgrade, which was very expensive.
That's why
Are
we went into
these
the DCC.
New radios on that same
Yeah.
system, additional radios, or did the old ones just wear out? and it's
Yeah,
time to
Ryan?
replace?
Ryan has a
Right.
specific.
I talked to the police today. These are the ones you see them all carrying on themselves. So this is the day-to-day radio that they use, and it's about a 10-year radio, and we
Yeah.
got the last ones in '07.
There you go.
Okay.
Replacing the radios.
And there is another portion of that too, so there's the ones that are in the vehicles,
Yeah.
and those are
And then the
scheduled out
ones
for
that are on
next year.
them,
Next year.
on officer radios and vehicle radios.
These things are 5,000 each.
Yeah.
I need 80 of them.
$5,000
That's how you get up to
Yeah.
400K.
is an
They're
expensive radio.
expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Gee.
yeah.
At this point, we don't have a planned use of fund balance for next year for the second set of them, so that could be something as well.
Okay.
All right, now on to the special revenue funds. So if you remember back to the pie chart I had a few slides ago, this is a slim portion of the pie of things that are in the special revenue funds. About $4 million worth of spending, and half of that is in the EDA fund. And then cable franchise is another $1 million. So those are the majority of the special revenue funds, and we'll look at those individually here. So cable, this, as you look at 2018, there's a spike. That was the mobile replacement of the mobile studio shared with Egan. And then you get into more consistent numbers. You can see they are spending down their fund balance. If you look at, so the green line indicates, I'll just stop because we have a bunch of these slides that look the same, so I'll stop and explain. Sources are their revenues over the next 5 years and compared to the 2018 budget. The red are the expenditure plan for the next 5 years, and the green indicates where the fund balance will go with this planned level of spending. So these are the totals off of when you look at your 5-year financial plans with the details in your book. This is just a pictorial of that and where this planned level of spending for current service levels would go, where the fund balance is projected to go on that. So revenues are very flat in the cable franchise fee fund, so we don't project there to be a lot of increases. Right now, we're not projecting a lot of decreases. So what can change there is the franchise agreement is still in negotiations. So subscribers could change, and as we know, that is an issue with cable. And then their fee structure that they're charging their subscribers can change, so which can also change our revenues. So we are just projecting at this point very flat. It has been very flat. And then we project, so what are we doing today for service levels in this particular fund, and what will that cost? And there's some capital in that fund. So you're seeing a little up and down, might be a little bit capital, but we're projecting inflationary type of things in here. And so you can see, even though expenditures in this fund are projected to exceed revenues at this point in time, knowing what we know, which is a little bit of a crystal ball, they would still be able to continue to operate, but at a certain point in time, they would have to adjust current service levels to continue this.
Can I just add something, Kelly? The other thing that this does not reflect is the recent decision that the FCC made in terms of their narrow view on what capital is. Now, there's an appeal, and it's going to look different, but that is one of the things. Right now, with that FCC decision, the definition of capital is very narrow, and capital would only be for the construction of a building which houses your equipment. So none of your equipment, not the mobile production truck. So depending on where that falls, capital could look very different here in the future.
And organizations like the U.S. Conference of Mayors and the National League of Cities and MACTA, and I don't think NACO's on it, but we're fighting the FCC and getting Congress to help us with this.
Other things.
Yeah, Dan.
Is there any risk of the PEG fee going away?
Yes.
Because you are so good at, like, the host fee, responding and being able to figure out a plan to cover that and shift things around to be able to put us on solid footing with a $500,000 surprise. What's the grand total of the PEG fee revenue?
I don't know if that's a number I have off the top of my head, but let's see if it's in here. Oh, yes.
Yep.
Okay. Excuse me. The PEG fees in the 2019 projected to be 320,000.
Yeah, that's what I was
So,
thinking.
The PEG
That's
portion of
just
that.
PEG fee
PEG
and that's
portion.
not the
so,
franchise fee, because the franchise fee, we're still at 29 cents.
The franchise fee, Madam Mayor, is 5% of gross revenue.
Okay, and the PEG fee is with the 29 cents, is that what I'm thinking?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the PEG fee, I believe, is
20 'cause it comes
it's
from
like
the-
$1.80
from each.
something.
$1.89
Yeah.
$1.89
That's right,
per
$1.89.
subscriber.
Yeah, that's right, $1.89. We're,
so where would we potentially look to backfill that with our current partners and people at the table and revenue sources, whatever it might be? What would be an option for a Plan B backup if that were to go away in the next year or two or whatever?
Dana?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, because we're still in negotiations with Comcast, I don't know if I want to have that
Have that discussion
conversation
now.
right now. I do feel, what I can say is that we did meet with Comcast representatives last week, and I remain optimistic that we will reach an agreement in the near future. We're not that far away.
And it wouldn't be Comcast that's in control of that PEG fee, it would be federal legislation, correct?
Madam Mayor,
Yeah,
members of the council, the FCC actually provides some definition around what qualifies as what, and sometimes our definitions are not necessarily aligned, and so that's part of the negotiations process. So they do, cable companies are required by federal law to pay a PEG fee or pay the cities to provide the PEG services, the public education and governmental funding.
And there are times when the cable entities lobby the FCC to do away with that.
It's been going on for quite some time.
Yep,
This isn't a
it has
new
been.
battle, and so my
Over
reason
10
for
years.
the rationale for my question is what if, and I understand the timing is not ideal right now until we know, but it seemed like the feds were really pulling the strings on authorization of cables outfits to negotiate and pay that. And if they came and said, if the administration, the FCC said, we're not going to require those anymore, it would be strictly a negotiation between us and Comcast. And so, who knows where it would go from there. But I just want to be thinking of a Plan B backup because that's a big nut to swallow for us.
Yeah, Dana and then Kelly.
I do have one piece of good news to share, kind of related. Frontier, we have some competition here,
Yeah.
and Frontier we have an agreement with them currently for a cable franchise, and they did just notify us. They have to put us on a 2 or 3 year notification before entering into negotiations, and they have put us on notification that they intend to move forward
Yeah.
with continuing to provide those services. So we anticipate renegotiating a cable franchise with them.
And you remember when they were here and then we
I've been
awarded
waiting for them to offer that
and-
service ever since that day, and
And
it hasn't been here. Yeah.
CenterLink, whatever, also
Yeah,
is
we're
here, but then they,
CenturyLink.
and CenturyLink, and then they backed out. But we
Yeah.
approved both.
Right, and Frontier presented a brochure and a
Yep.
plan and services and,
Yep.
content and services. It was gonna be true
Mm-hmm.
competition to the cable providers, finally, and I haven't seen it yet,
Mm-hmm.
and it's difficult to find. It's not in our area, but they've offered it in other areas of the country.
Dana?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Keeley, they are, Frontier is offering those cable services here. That number continues to increase, albeit slowly. They're not doing any heavy marketing, but if people were to call and they are in that service area and ask about the service, it is something that they will provide and give information. And our number continues to increase. I don't have the exact number, but I believe it's right around 100 people at the moment. So it's creeping up there.
Yeah.
It's a proof of concept test. We'll hopefully get bigger than that. I've been on their site numerous times, but I haven't in probably 6 months because I gave up. I kept looking and calling and trying to find what they had presented to us, and it just didn't seem like it had launched yet. But as you're saying, if you're in a particular area, I would assume where the fiber is, they can provide it.
Yeah.
Super.
Okay, Kelly?
Okay. I was just going to add that if you were asking whether we had another place like the facilities fund to replace this, that there isn't another
Yeah.
place like that currently. So
No, it might be a different revenue source, a partner in the whole
Yeah, and I think
program,
one
you
of
know,
the
who
things
knows?
is that we can look on a national level what other cities are also beginning to do in this regard. So we can look on a national level and see what others are doing, and so we can have best practices about how we fund our
Sure.
government.
Well, we have a great partner with the school district, and they have some great programming, and they have great access to grants to support that programming, so maybe there's some options.
Grants is
okay. Moving on to the youth center, as you can see, this green bar goes right to the bottom, and that is actually the plan. So there is some remaining fund balance in that fund, and it is designated. Well, they have grant. We still get grant revenue and grant expenditures. They match each other, and then the fund balance is remaining for operations that they didn't spend in a previous year, and then funding of building maintenance. So it is spending down over the next 5 years.
Yeah, Dan, I think the other thing is that it's donate to the max, go and donate to.
Yeah, I
our-
saw that from Catalyst.
Yeah, yeah,
Can I ask, I wrote a question on this. What, is it ops or maintenance? What are we paying out of that fund for? Is it strictly building maintenance?
Very small amounts of building maintenance, yes.
Which is what was part of the plan all along. Great, thank you.
As that fund balance goes down, then that would be something the building maintenance part would have to roll back into the general fund. But it is a fairly small number, as you
Yeah.
can see. Okay, I want to say $13,000.
Yeah, it's pretty small.
So this is also in your budget book. Talks about community development block grant and where that money is spent. So that will you will have it's at your discretion to reprioritize that, but it has been allocated as it has pretty much been in the past. We're not expecting. We built in about 10% lower, but we've also every year they've kind of come in a little bit more.
and CDBG is always on the cutting block.
Yes.
And so we are always very grateful when it just holds at a particular budget, but it's always on a cutting block. It's been reduced since I've been here, over and over again. Yeah, Dan?
Just, could you cite some typical common examples of what those funds are used for, from our perspective?
The youth center.
Yeah. Youth and Senior Center.
Yes, and those housing and rehab projects are actually done through the county, or through CDA. So
Part of our, but we also
Yeah.
have a match in that.
we allocate
Yeah. Yeah.
our funds to them. So we've got the Burnsville Youth Collaborative, 360 Communities for the Family Support Worker, Senior Services for the Senior Volunteer Program, DARTS, Chore Services. EMS grants is about 7,000 for 2019 and 2020. That's been very helpful for us as we get people who call in, which we
And they
often
don't have
do,
insurance.
that they don't have insurance, and if they meet certain income guidelines, at some place we can send them that helps with the
Yeah.
with their ambulance bills. There probably actually are more people who could take advantage of this program, but
How about it?
at this level of funding, we kind of determine the funding based on how many people have taken advantage of it, which isn't at that rate is not a lot of ambulance bills, but it is helpful. And that money comes then directly back to Burnsville.
Yeah.
So a lot of those folks would just plain not be able to pay their bill, and so then Burnsville does get paid for that ambulance run.
And this helps because this fund also pays our portion of our partnership with the school district for the senior center. Because that's a partnership.
I know that one of the things you touched on was the housing and rehab projects. That has nothing to do with the, or maybe it does, any of the incentives that we have today that,
No.
you know, for someone to fix up their home or, you know, the waiving
No.
of fees. We don't dip into
These
that.
funds are highly restricted.
So they're administered by the CDA,
Yeah.
and it's a revolving loan from fund program. So somebody
And you have
and we
to
do
m-
direct people to, you know, if they're looking for some help with making repairs to their homes, they can go apply there, and they would get a loan, and then as they pay it back, it goes back into that pool. So, and the amount that we put into that pool, it goes to Burnsville
Yeah. Residents.
residents,
Yeah.
not just a county-wide pool to the Burnsville, what portion the county has available for Burnsville residents.
Yeah, and I think this program is on it's not on a calendar year, it's on a fiscal year, and then it always comes before us, and if you look and you see how much it's allocated, that 265, where it's allocated, and that usually comes before us for approval.
And it's very, in
Yeah.
your, under the grant fund, in the special revenue funds in your budget book, there's very specific as
Yeah.
to what the plan is.
Where all that money is going.
Okay. Moving on, the EDA fund, you've seen that financial plan a number of times before you in the last few.
So Dan, you took over and it's headed downhill.
Yeah.
What's
maybe
going on?
if somebody would vote for increases, it wouldn't happen.
So, you've seen the detail of the 5-year financial plan. This, again, just puts it graphically. The big spike in 2019 is the grant, the
Yeah,
ELF grant.
the ELF,
So that is a matching revenue and expenditure coming of 1.1 million. So we factored in some increased spending for a position and for some consulting dollars based on your economic development plan that you have recently seen working from the Community Development Department and Ellers Financial. And it does spend down that fund balance. So with the $25,000 increase for 2019 and projecting a $35,000 annual increases in the next years, you would spend that down. So without any further property tax increases, this is a 5-year use of those funds. So if it were to continue, you would need to increase. But I think at this point, it's there's some unknowns there, and you'll find out the success of that, or whether you want to redirect funds elsewhere.
But if we find other sources of revenue that could shift, correct, without property tax increases, that we could put into the EDA fund.
Yes.
For example,
There's many examples.
you-
I think we're gonna have discussions about that next year.
why not now with Bill here?
Okay, Kelly, please.
Forestry fund, this is your, what was for the emerald ash borer, also future expansion to other diseased and distressed trees. The 2018 fund balance included some developer fees. So as you see, that fund balance is kind of high. We received some developer fees for replacement of a lot of trees that went into this fund is being managed within this fund. But you can see the other sources are really flat. And that's property tax levy. We had in the past planned increases in the property tax levy in that EAB fund or EAB plan, but with improved treatment and managed costs in that area, we have not planned for an increase. Do you want to add anything more to that, Ryan?
Just
Yeah.
EAB has a ribbon in Burnsville, and we didn't have Armageddon with ash trees. But because of all the work that we've started out ahead of time, we got a really good handle on it, and I would highly recommend we just stay right where we're at, and we think we can really keep a handle on those and also use this to get ahead of other types of tree diseases that may come our way. We've rewritten the use a little bit to allow us just outside of the ash EAB to allow us to come with whatever the next thing is, whether it's some kind of moth or whatever. But we should get a little more flexibility and be using the funds as judiciously as we can.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Kelly.
So that's all of the bigger special revenue funds that I've covered and charts. So moving on to the capital projects funds, you can see that excuse me, the top three are street and infrastructure related. That's Infrastructure Trust Fund, Improvement Construction, and Street Maintenance Funds. And then your Parks Capital Fund is another one of your larger, and really the Parks Capital Fund bars are extra large this year because of the trail that we have a lot of intergovernmental funding for, so it's abnormally longer than it would be. And then you have equipment and vehicle replacement, facilities replacement, and IT capital. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ryan to give you some highlights of the capital improvement plan that factor into these funds.
Okay.
Sounds good. As you can see on the screen there, there's many different areas that capital improvements are necessary for. I won't read through all those, but maybe you can go to the second slide there. So then here's more of the hard and fast streets, utility, those types of things are streetlights, water systems, sanitary sewer, and stormwater. The graphic there just shows one of our highlights, and that'll be on the sewer and water one, which is our update of our SCADA system. So that's just a screen printout of what we use to help us monitor all of our wells, all of our treatment plant. It's basically, we don't staff our treatment plant 24 hours a day. We're on call all the time, but we don't have full-time employees there. And what the SCADA system allows us to do is if pressure starts to drop, we get alarms and notices, and we're planning on upgrading to the latest thing out there.
And it comes to your telephones, correct?
Right. So
Yeah,
it's
and it's just so people know where it goes, because when you're not at City Hall, you still get that phone call from the SCADA system,
right. We do,
and you get all of this
it's
information.
what the new SCADA system will do is give us much more redundancy.
Yeah.
So if we have a failure with, let's say, fiber isn't available here, now, we have a big IT network over at our maintenance center as well.
Yeah.
So we'll be able to utilize both of those. And the other real big improvement it was based more on laptops, the first generation. The second generation is based much more on handheld devices, tablets, and those sorts of things. So this is, you may have heard Blaine had 2 times they had to boil
That's
water
right.
in the last year. I think
And we
Hastings may have had
because
one.
we've had the system that
Yes. I'm not gonna
alerts you
go.
and you to get things done.
I'm not going to go on camera here and say today we'll never have that situation,
No.
but this will reduce our risk of those kinds of situations occurring. So, so this is, it's difficult to tell exactly where we are. I just point out that our street improvement program for 2019 is spread out nicely throughout the city. We're not focusing on any one area. I described that Lakeville area, if you see right on south of Crystal
Yeah.
Lake.
Yeah.
We're working with Lakeville on that project. And then in the northeast corner, we're planning on doing River Hills Drive last year, or 2018, but then the Met Council told us they were gonna do a sewer lining project, so we wanted to hold off a year, and so we do plan on, I would say that's our number one complaint we get right now is at River Hills Drive, because the ride's so bumpy.
Because the rest of North River Hills was done, except for that one section, correct?
Vast majority.
Yeah.
Yep.
The vast majority, because
The further you go south and
Yeah.
west, the less, there's still some
Yeah.
areas in there, but the further you go north and east, that's correct.
yeah.
So that would be that slide. And then on intersection improvements, you guys, we have talked about replacing the signal systems at County Road 5 and Burnsville Parkway and County Road 5 on 136th Street. They're bidding those actively now, and we'll be, or Dakota County will be replacing those in the year 2019.
And they're going to be doing the maintenance also, taking care of it.
We are responsible for the costs on our legs.
Yeah,
but we
on
have
our leg.
We have a contract with Dakota County to take on the signal maintenance for
Maintenance,
us.
yeah.
And that way, we don't have to staff electricians, and Dakota County has a more expansive group, which works out great for both
Because I
organizations.
remember the joint powers agreement when that came through.
Yep, that's an ongoing deal. Every year, as long
Yeah.
as we stick with it and don't want our own, that's what will happen, and it definitely works out well. And then we do show replacements out into the future as well. We schedule for 1 year our leg on a county signal. And then street lighting, we allocate $170,000 each year for upgrades, replacements, those kinds of things. So that's, that fund is completely static at $170,000 a year, and that's all based on a fee.
Okay.
The feds have, or the Met Council representing the federal government has went through and rated all the different projects we put in. The one is the Cliff Road realignment at 35W. The other one is the pedestrian crossing of 13 at Nicollet. We ranked higher in the Cliff Road project from where we, versus our competition. But I will have to find out what happens, whether either one of these.
So
or
we
both.
don't, so we made the cut this year, but it hasn't been funded yet.
We
Is
are.
that's why it's hopeful?
Yeah, exactly. There's a certain line, depending upon if they decide to fund more street projects, our Cliff Road interchange project will have a really good chance at getting funded. If they move more into the trails and multimodal, the Nicollet Avenue 13 pedestrian one would have a better chance. It's possible both could go, but I'm more hopeful on the Cliff Road at this point.
Okay.
Yeah, so that would be a great project from both traffic and from economic development, because we could work towards getting rid of that
Yeah.
Cliff Road West. That's kind of bisects there.
Okay. All right, and then on to the financial plans for the Infrastructure Trust Fund. So this is an example of what we were talking about earlier, where we have more expenditures in 1 year than sources. So I think answering your earlier question, Councilmember Keeley, about how does that happen every year? And no, and as Ryan mentioned, the River Hills project is one of these that plays into that. So the funding sources in the Infrastructure Trust Fund are very set in level, so which is MSA and the ITF levy. And we pushed a project back from 2018. And if we look at 2018, you can actually see that the revenues exceeded the expenditures. So that is, and then we're back to more matching. And then you have a year in 2023 where the projects make sense to do a little bigger project that year, and if you were to look one more year out, it balances back out again. So this fund and these capital project funds provide us flexibility in order to make the best choices of how to package projects together, as opposed to just spending exactly what we are collecting in that fund in any particular year. So we've got contiguous projects together and for an efficient use of the project versus splitting up something just for the sake of having a set amount every year. And as I mentioned, there's that two funding sources, the ITF levy, that continues the $50,000 annual levy increase, and the state aid, which is MSAS, that is dependent on what the state, but it is it's a fairly predictable amount.
Yeah. And we haven't used some of our state aid where sometimes we borrow from the future to get something done. We haven't done that in a few years, right?
The last time we did that was in 2015 when we
Yeah.
did Nicollet Avenue,
Yeah.
Burnsville Parkway, and Aldrich Avenue.
Because that was such a big project. But now we're caught up. We're going year by year.
We wanted to resurface those, so we didn't
Yeah.
end up having to reconstruct them.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then the green bar here, we kind of target about a $2 million fund balance here. We like that number for cash flow purposes on these types of projects. And it also provides the flexibility to do just what I was talking about as well. So when it makes sense, to do a neighborhood. We might have a little larger neighborhood one year, a little smaller neighborhood. We have that flexibility. Or when, the Met Council comes and says, we're redoing this area for this, we might be able to move something up to do it at the same time. So it's those kinds of things that this fund really gives us that flexibility to do, so that we're using the money as smartly as possible. So you can see it dips down in 2023, but it does actually reverse itself in that following year. So that's a 1-year blip, and just kind of demonstrates just what I was talking about, is that we have that flexibility to do that and take advantage of those timing issues. Parks Capital Fund, the Lake Marion Trail is the big thing in 2019, and we're taking advantage of revenue sources from other intergovernmental agencies to fund that. So we are getting an amenity within the city using some other resources. The Infrastructure Trust Fund provides 10% of the ITF levy for renovations in parks, so that's factored into this fund. And development fees are projected to be a little higher in the next few years, so we've factored that in this process as well. Those must be used for improvements versus renovations. So the tax levy portion of this goes for the renovations, and the developer fees are for improvements. And we do have ways of tracking that, so we know that we're not crossing lines there within this fund.
Yeah,
Madam
Dana?
Mayor, members of the council, sorry Kelly for interrupting. I want to point out something with the Lake Marion Regional Trail, the south segment. And I think I just want to take the opportunity to thank Commissioner Workman for supporting us on this project. We had quite a significant funding gap to the tune of approximately $2 million. And she was very supportive in advocating for the funding of this project, for this project.
Did they pass it? Is it in their
I think
budget?
she made the recommendation, I believe, on the October 16th, and it's part of the budget recommendation going to the board for final approval.
It is part of the budget recommendation?
It is part of their budget recommendation.
So, and they will be voting on that in December?
I believe so.
Okay.
But I thought
But it is
take the
included.
opportunity to
Oh,
thank
that's
Commissioner Workman
wonderful.
for her
Yeah.
support and work
So,
in helping
yeah.
us
So
secure that funding.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that, Dana. And so we'll do a shout out to Commissioner Workman for her advocacy work. But this is the Lake Marion portion of it, and we just didn't have the money.
We never did, no.
No,
So it was, they were already paying more than their share of the local share. And then for the parts that went up by that $2.5 million, they're paying the lion's share of that as well.
yeah, well, and they're the ones who increased the way that was going to be, rather than how it was going to be built out.
Yeah,
Right.
Much to their credit, they really want a great trail system throughout Dakota County. They want to be competing with Hennepin County, with all the developed trails, and they know cities can't just afford to pay half of a $5 million project, so.
Yeah, and that was a big ticket item, and we didn't have the money, so.
Right, if you look on the graphic here, the red line, way at the beginning, it's Sunset Pond Park, and then
Yeah.
42 is the east-west road. As it turns out, it wasn't as easy to get underneath the existing railroad bridge there
Yeah.
as we'd hoped, so that was about $1 million more. We, out of our state aid account, we did include an extra $150,000 of that.
Ryan, did we have to move it? Because I remember when we had the open house over at the library, did we have to move the trail also off of some of the
This is,
backyard?
this is extremely close to where it was planned all along.
Yeah.
We investigated many different things once we found out some of these costs,
Yeah.
and there was nothing else that made sense. As Dana said, it was up to Dakota County to either decide to put more money towards it or not. Due to Commissioner Workman's efforts, they are agreeing to do that.
Yeah.
So we're basically back to very close to the same alignment we always had. The more questionable part was on the south end, where it crosses through that wetland.
Yeah.
We showed more of a southerly path, and it turns out there's more valuable natural resources in there. So we ended up having to go north, meaning we had to have a longer boardwalk section, which could be another $1 million, but that's in the estimate that we're all talking about, in that
Yeah.
$5.2 million.
Because of the boardwalk.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's 30 to 50 feet of peat, so you gotta drill these piers way down into it,
Yeah.
and it's gonna be quite a project to watch.
Yeah. Okay, good.
So, yeah, I guess that's the third project there. The whole thing is estimated at this point at $5.2 million. Our estimated cost is $0.6 million, so obviously if you can get that kind of cost or funding coming in to an asset in town, and this is, by the way, something Dakota County will be maintaining, so this won't be our thing to maintain in the future either. Just like the Minnesota River Trail, Dakota County does maintain that one as well.
Yeah, yeah.
And then Woke Park, we've talked about that before. That's almost $500,000 replacing all the standard fence and lights and playground equipment. Alamagna Park, similar. We're going to try to make the fields more playable in wet times, replacing all the dugouts, and then adding fiber optics for more data things, security, and those sorts of things. And then Sioux Fisher had the same problem. The dugouts literally
They really
collapsed.
look bad.
And we're
Yeah,
replacing all those.
Those
but
dugouts look bad.
it's crazy how much they cost. It's almost
Yeah.
$500,000 to replace
Build a house
dugouts.
for that.
Yeah.
What's that?
You can build a house for that.
Yeah, build a really nice house for that. Yes.
Yeah.
So that's some of the highlights out of the capital fund and parks.
Moving on to the equipment and vehicle capital replacement fund. So this is mainly vehicles, but we also have some larger pieces of equipment that are used throughout the city. And we have for 2019 the one-time expenditures for the police radios that we talked about earlier, and would be a transfer in from the general fund. Expenditures here also vary by year based on replacement needs, and our fleet department along with other departments analyze that annually to maintain the positive fund balance within the policy. So just because something is scheduled for replacement in a particular year, they are looking at that and the status of each vehicle and whether it can go another year, or if it can, if some other vehicle has greater needs, they are managing that actively every year. But we do make this plan so that we're trying to balance out those peak years where there are fire trucks and ambulances and those kinds of things that are very expensive, with other years that we can balance those, so we don't end up with every vehicle in one year, and
Would not be a good way to budget.
that would not be pleasant, so. So here is a little view.
Well, in the fire area, out of the $0.4 million, about 250,000 of it is for an ambulance. Parks is just standard mowers and carts and those kinds of things. All of the police $0.7 million, 400,000 is the radios. So, the streets includes a tractor, which will help with our sidewalk plow program in the wintertime. And then stormwater is a little mini backhoe that we'll be able to use and have all year round.
Okay. And then the facilities fund, and you can see the drop in revenue in
Yeah,
2019. So this is where we moved the
yeah.
property tax revenue out, and then
Swapped it with the,
we moved landfill host
Yeah.
fees into the, since that is reduced by 500,000, they don't get the full million in this fund. We feel the shortage in this fund. So if nothing else changes here, so if landfill fees come in as projected over the next 3 to 5 years, that's where we'll be here. You could, so in 2022, that is the year that it says the big spike, that is the replacement of Fire Station 1.
Fire Station 1.
So, in doing this, you'll have more bonding because you don't have as much available from the property tax levy as you do from the host fee. Now, if you approve an expansion of the landfill and the host fees go back up, this will change. If that doesn't happen and you were to increase the franchise fees, that
And
would
that's
change.
on our
If
agenda
you
for
leave,
January.
if you
all
leave
day.
yes, madam, if you leave them the same, then that just means that you will have to do more bonding on that fire station. So there's a lot
But the thing
of
is, we
ifs.
have a source of revenue when we bond
Yep.
for that.
So a lot of ifs in that one.
Okay.
Yep, okay. IT Capital Fund. This one, the expenditures and the revenues, you can see we're spending down some fund balance there. That is okay in this particular fund because those are some projects that have been delayed that have created that fund balance. So it again is one of those funds that provides us the flexibility to do things at the right time. So if new technology is coming down the pike and we decide to delay a project, this fund provides that ability to do that. And that is it for the capital projects funds, the highlights of the capital project funds. Moving on to the enterprise fund. So these are your business type activities where you collect fees and charges. And you can see here the total of all capital funds are on the top, and you can see that water and sewer represents the majority of those enterprise funds and stormwater. So if you added the two, water and sewer and stormwater together, they are the majority of all your enterprise funds. And the Ames Center, Ice Center, golf course, and streetlight are much smaller portions of that particular group of funds. Utility fees. We are looking at a 4.5% increase for water and sanitary sewer, and that is as planned, that you've had in your 5-year plans. The base rate remains at $6 a month. We do have a plan to study rate structures over the next 2 years. We are going to take a look at what is the appropriate level for a base rate, what are in those variable costs, and all of that. It is something that we had planned to do right before Steve Albrecht left, and now it's Ryan and I are going to be working on that in the next year or two.
Okay.
And then stormwater has a 1% increase, and projected in the next 5 years, there's a 1.5% to 2.5% increase in those out years. And there's no increase for the streetlight utility. Are
you calculating the Met Council's fee to us with the sanitary sewer?
Yeah, that is
Is that included in the 4.5?
Yes, it is.
Because I think, Dana, when we were at Metro Cities, didn't they say that they were proposing a rate hike increase?
Madam Mayor, they did, but that came in less than anticipated for 2019.
Okay.
They had a couple years where they had really spiked those.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And we absorbed that between our water and sewer. So we didn't raise rates to match that. We did some swapping. And we did that because we wanted to see where that was going long term. And it did come back down. We would have to, if they had continued that, we would have to make quite an adjustment.
And we'll continue to watch that too. Dana and I and Metro City sit on that Metro governance. Ryan.
It went up only 2.7% for us in 2019 is what they told us the increase was. And we're doing a really good job with lining our sewers to prevent I&I infiltration into the loss.
Yeah.
And then also our growth isn't quite as fast as some other cities. So therefore, like I was standing right by the Apple Valley guy, his was in the area of 9%. 7
So
to 9%.
that is included in the 4.5.
The 2.7% increase to Burnsville that goes to the Met Council is part of the 4.5%
Okay,
increase.
good.
Yeah, it's not an additional on top of that.
Yeah.
And I think we had 7 or 8% in the past couple of years.
2 and 3 years ago.
Yeah.
I think last year wasn't too bad, and this year, I guess basically 2018 was much better, and then 2019 is also looking favorable.
Yeah. Okay.
So we were able to level those because of our use of fund balance and use of swapping out what we're spending on the city
And
side
what
of it.
people need to understand, and thank you, Kelly and Dana, in really understanding how all of that works to make sure that we keep those fees to our residents at a steady level rather than them seeing these spikes every time the Met Council also
It
increases those INI charges.
Madam Mayor, council members, it really goes back to your 5-year planning. I
Yeah.
can't say that often enough,
Yeah.
but when you go back to your 5-year planning, we can take a long-term view of that rather than reacting to it for just 1 year.
Yeah, but you do a good job of really taking care of those
Thank you.
fiscal challenges that we have no control over. They're imposed on us.
So this is what the water and sewer fund looks like, and you can see that your fund balance remains very
Very
steady
good.
there for.
Yeah.
Yeah,
when
so
are
some
we
of the highlights or big ticket items that we have is
Yeah.
Burnsville's blessed to own the single largest above-ground water reservoir in the
Yeah.
state, known as Heather Hills Water Tower. And so when it's due for repainting and coating the inside, it's very expensive. So we'll be planning on getting the plans done this year, and then a lot of the work will be done in 2020. So it'll have a big effect on our whole system. Unfortunately, you can't paint in the
Does-
winter when typically you would want to have that. So it'll basically fully recoat and paint both the inside and the outside.
And is that a 10-year? When we do that, it's every 10 years?
10
Because
to
I remember
15.
we did this once before because we had to
You're right, it's in that 10 to 15.
drain all of the water and then.
Yeah, it's a big
go-
deal, and all
it's a
the
big-
antennas on there have to come off, so
Yeah.
it's a really big undertaking, as you can well see from the price
Yeah.
tag as well.
Because I remember the last time we did this and it was really huge.
Yeah, and it's just a huge structure. But if we don't maintain it,
No,
we're
we
gonna
have
lose
to
it.
take care of
Yeah.
it because it has a direct impact on how that water is for our citizens if we don't take care of the inside of it.
Well, and replacement of it would be more like $10 to $15 million as opposed to this painting.
Yeah.
So this is a much better way of doing it.
Yeah.
Because it could last us,
Another,
generations
Yeah.
if we keep up with it.
Yeah.
I already talked about sorry, if you want.
no, I was just saying that I remember the people who have antennas on that. It's a good thing they came out and helped because it's their
Yeah.
stuff.
You'll see like a temporary structure
Yeah.
down below where they'll relocate all those to, and then we'll have to put them all back on. I talked about the SCADA system update already, and then also we plan to rehabilitate the sanitary sewer lift station that is right by Waste Management.
Okay. Moving on to the stormwater fund, you can see we're have a planned use of fund balance in this fund, and this really goes to what we need as we're projecting out the projects for the years, future years, and then also just where that fund balance has grown to because of savings in projects from the past. So even though it's going down, it's getting down to the level at which we like it. So I'm
Right.
trying to press.
Okay, some highlights here. We're definitely getting in more into maintenance as opposed to those big ticket projects where we're trying to remove all the phosphorus and get our lakes off of the impaired waters list. So you can see ravine restoration, we're blessed with lots of bluffs. What that also means is we get erosion, so have a plan we know which ones we need to address before we start having soil loss up to homes and that sort of thing. So that'll be a big project there. We'll be back into the pond cleanup business this year, so we gotta treat our stormwater, and the only way to do it is keep the ponds up to date. Interestingly, in the bottom right-hand corner, when we updated the water resource management plan, we got a system-wide stormwater model. Now we're really gonna focus in on the whole system from Keller Lake to Crystal Lake to Twin Lakes, Early, Sunset Pond, all the way to 13. And what we're gonna be doing is looking for low-cost, high-benefit improvements in that whole system. Maybe we can reduce the bounce on Twin Lake, maybe and Crystal Lake, you get those emails from us describing they've had to put the no wake thing on.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something we can do that doesn't cost that much to reduce that bounce. That's the kind of stuff we'll be looking for with that. That we won't fund any of the improvements, but at least we'll be able to find out that situation. And maybe the one I'm most excited about is sustainability plan update. We've done a great job in this area with your support, and we're basically through a lot of the things that we're able to do. This will allow us to go to the next generation of our sustainability efforts, but without a plan, you don't have anything identified. So this will be identify things that we can continue to do to make our community more sustainable.
And what people need to understand is that we measure things here, and because we measure, we achieve.
Right.
Yeah.
Good
And
example.
so with the sustainability plan, there are measures.
Right.
Yeah, so thank you, because I think there was an email that came from the state with regard to the efforts that we've made in terms of water
Right.
and energy efficiency and the sustainability. Also, they talked about the carbon reduction.
Right, they go hand in hand. Our
Yeah.
single largest electrical user is our water production, and we've knocked off 47% reduction in the
Yeah.
amount of energy we use. And that goes all back into the sewer and water plan we just talked about.
Yeah.
Without the funding there, we couldn't have
Yeah.
made these improvements.
Nicely done. Thank you, staff.
Okay. We're getting towards the end of our funds. Ice Center Fund, as you can see, there's no general fund support for this operation. With the we did move the roof replacement from 2018 to be bonded from the facilities fund, and the Ice Center Fund to provide $90,000 in cash funding. So that's happening. That was part of the 2018 / going into 2019 budget. That provides them with the operating funds to be able to fund all of their regular capital improvements, or capital replacements. So their ice resurfacers and building needs and that sort of thing. So this fund can do that regular kind of thing. They do not have enough fund balance or operating revenues to cover those major things like a roof replacement. So the facilities fund use there provided that ability to do that. In the golf course, the fees are already at the top of the market. They have increases of 1 to 3% proposed. They also have enough cash for their capital improvements. And when we make projections, we make them based on average weather. So
Yeah.
not the low years or the high years.
Yeah.
So. And they are very weather dependent.
They are. And when we have a wet spring, they don't open.
But they got a long season last year, thank goodness,
Yep.
and got some of that back.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, this year it got clipped short.
Short, yeah.
Yeah, like quickly.
Yeah.
And then the Ames Center, some great news here. The 5-year forecast shows positive cash flow balance by the end of 5 years. So that, if you remember, we have an advance from the general fund from way back when, at the very opening of the facility, and the host fee projections were reduced in from 280 to 175 for the next 3 years, and then to zero thereafter within this fund. Because if you remember, on the when we talk about landfill host fees, $1 million of it goes into the general fund, or did now goes into the facilities fund. But some of it was in about 300,000 or 400,000, or 300,000 in the Ames Center Fund to support their capital replacement and portion to the debt. So even with that reduction, because they're operating projections now, so just the operations that go on in the building and the expenses are in a positive forecast for the next 5 years, we're able to pay back those funds to the general fund.
And the facilities capital improvement is in the franchise enterprise, right? In the facilities fund now,
For the Ames Center?
for the Ames Center, because it is an asset, a facilities asset of the community?
There aren't any Ames Center capital improvements in the facilities fund. In the policy, you could, the Ames Center is identified as an option to use the facilities fund, but it is currently all covered in the Ames Center fund. Now, again, I think like the Ice Center, you have to replace the roof in the future. It's only 10 years old at this point in time, but when we get 10, 15 years down the road, we get to one of those major
Yeah.
expenditures.
And that's what
Then-
I'm looking at, is 10,
Then
15
it will be
years.
something that will, need to be funded somehow.
Yeah, and that carpet is pretty, it's showing its wear.
Yes. It's-
And the carpet is one of their, I'll call regular capital kinds of replacements.
Okay.
That's already planned out of this funding. So they have some regular kinds of capital improvements or capital equipment. Those are coming out of this particular fund.
Okay,
So this second chart I'm showing is just the operating portion of that budget. So naming rights are projected to be $150,000 annually. That's a change because of the new Masquerade
Theater.
naming rights. So that's providing an additional $50,000 a year, which is helping really what's putting it into the positive. No net operating support is needed in the future years for the operating part. For the capital, yes. For the debt, yes. But not for the operating portion.
Okay.
Here, here, yay,
And that concludes
celebrate.
all of my charts. So I have just a couple discussion items here. So the first one, does the council support the proposed capital improvements plan as presented?
Okay. Anybody opposed to what has been presented? Everybody is in, okay, so,
Capital
yes, the supports the capital.
There we go.
Yeah.
My clicker is starting to get tired,
And
I think.
so, the use of funds as proposed.
So the use
as
of
we
fund
saw.
balance as proposed. Any discussion or concern
I think
about
we've
that?
asked questions as we go along. Any concerns or move forward with the 4.9? Okay, I think we all said that earlier,
And that,
to move forward. Yeah,
and
Like it, but
Madam-
don't see any options
yeah,
left.
yeah.
Madam Mayor, council
Yes.
members, that
You're-
concludes
you're-
my
Yeah.
slides.
And staff has the direction, and you've heard that there is a support to move forward with the CIP, support to move forward with the 4.9. Okay. Any questions? Yeah, Dana?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I just want to make one comment. There was one takeaway, and then I do have another question for you. My takeaway was on the slide, the use of fund balance, unrestricted slide, or the unrestricted balance. There'll be a clarification. We'll send that out to council about the 100, what's making up that 165,000 for 2019, and what was
Yeah.
in the 2018 making up that 195. So we'll send that information to council. And then the other thing I have for council's consideration this evening is the November 27th work session.
Yeah,
Our plan was to, I think we got through everything here. Our plan was
to do the CIP on the 27th.
and I think we really plowed through, so thank you for sticking with us. If there's additional information that you'd like us to bring back, we can certainly do that. Or if you feel like you want to dive in a little bit deeper in any areas, we're happy to bring that back. But our recommendation would be, so if there is no further information and you're comfortable with the information as presented, that we cancel that November
cancel the
27th
20,
work
yeah.
session.
Bill? Cancel?
Cancel.
Okay. Anybody else?
I'm good with that.
Huh?
I'm good with that.
Yeah, I think
Actually,
we've got,
through so much.
we've got a lot that we went through. Anybody have any questions can talk with Dana, and then she can send out. I really appreciate the way that you've done this. Every time somebody has it, you answer by including the rest of the council on that answer to that one council member's question. That's really nicely done.
And I just
then
like
we're
to
all
add,
on the same
I
page.
just like to add, Madam Mayor, members of the council, I hope that you found that getting the budget books about a month early helped
Oh my
and helped
gosh.
facilitate
Very
us
much.
being able to do
I
that. So our
like-
plan
Very
is to
much.
continue to do that in
Yeah.
the future.
Getting it a month early, it gives
Yeah.
us the time to look at all of those. Yeah, I felt very well prepared coming into this, really understanding where all of the, she talked about where the funds, I remember what those numbers were. And because you did send it out. I also like the fact that instead of giving us the books and we plow through it by ourselves, you and Kelly walked each of us through the budget book. And that's new, and that's a great value. At least for me, I like that. I could ask some questions and then come back also. Yes.
Just as a recap, because this is a budget levy discussion, we've accommodated the $500,000 post-max tax vote surprise, but you did that with a combination of some cuts to get to the 4.7. I guess we'll just stick with the 4.7. Roughly, what's the total savings or cuts that you found to get to the 4.7?
Answer that?
Ballpark, nothing exact.
Yeah.
I know you work in the world
I
of exact
know,
numbers,
yeah.
but it's okay to be estimated.
I would say that they totaled somewhere in the $75,000 range.
And that's what, is that essentially what the difference of the 4.749 is 2/10 about $68,000
There's
bucks, right? So it's a little bit more than that.
Was that part of also looking at our seasonal, because you've talked about that, that was cutting back on the seasonal stuff?
It was, I hesitate to answer the question because there were so many different things that factored in and a
And
lot of
nothing really
moving
big.
parts. There's some things that were timing differences. There were some things that were actual reductions. There were some of those things like we phased in the insurance. We phased in the
What would maybe the better question is, not specifically the 70,000 or so, but what's the total value of all the things that you did to get to that number? Like the shifts and phasing in and moving stuff around. I mean, that ultimately had an impact to help get down below the max tax, to cover that $500,000.
Well, to cover the $500,000 was the $500,000. I mean, that was the shifts, and some, there's some delays in there as you looked at that facility fund that really delayed and made some bonding in the future. But I think that 75,000 are things that were actual changes to departments' expenditure budgets.
Because the 4.9 did not account for the $500,000.
No.
So we were 4.9 max tax. The things that you might have done to get under that, you've addressed, and it got it down to 4.7, and maybe it could have got a little bit lower, but you were getting it down a couple tenths or so. Then the $500,000, which is 1.5 percentage point, got thrown on us. So you had to obviously do whatever it took to get that absorbed, to get back under 4.9, right? So, yeah,
They just
Yeah.
shifted how they funded it. There was
Yeah.
no 500,000
Yeah.
found anywhere. It was,
So they went
they
to-
just shifted
Yeah.
how they
I
did
get
it.
it. I get it.
Yeah.
It's,
The other was
It
about a
is.
$60,000 savings they did on
Yeah.
some of the other things, and that's what it really
Yeah.
came down to.
Well,
but there's an impact on that shift, right?
Well, there's an impact on the shift, should they need it for where they shifted it to for some of
Yeah.
our capital improvements, but they can play with that as she explained. and-
Right. We have a little time to
Yeah, we have some
Yeah.
time for remedies.
set it up to actually absorb it over a little bit more
We
time.
just got the stuff out of our general fund, which is where it should
Yeah.
have been out of there a long time ago.
Yeah.
Madam Mayor,
Kelly.
council members, I mean, there was a reduction, because the $1 million that came out of the general fund was 500,000 that went into the facilities fund.
Yeah.
Because there was a loss
right.
there. And the 800,000 that came out of the facilities fund
Yeah.
didn't replace the whole.
Replaced it, so you
it's a
just,
couple hundred
the
thousand.
swap.
And we also had that whole 500,000 not happened, we would have had some revenues that would, so it's probably more like a $200,000 effect in total.
Yeah.
That we would have had some revenues, we would have been able to reduce the 4.9, we would have had some of the cuts we may have not made, because some of them are really, they're definitely uncomfortable. They are not as conservative as we like to be as we make those estimates. And I don't think we're overly conservative, but we don't want to be in a position where we have a lot of factors that change or inflationary things that we can't control and we can't absorb those things. So we put I think it puts us in a little bit of more of a situation that mid-year, if we have a lot of things that all add up on the negative side, mid-year we may be saying, well, we're going to have to cut back on these things to get through 2019 or use fund balance.
We're gambling, we're not going to have issues this year, basically.
It's harder to meet those budgets when you shave off all of those things every year.
Okay.
Well, thank you.
Bill?
So just to follow up, and I don't, so the kind of bottom line is that if we didn't have to do it, we still might be at 4.7 because we'd have been more conservative instead of taking
Yeah.
some
Risk.
some intelligent risk.
Yep.
So
Yeah, it might have been 4.5 or 4.6 with some like you said, some planned risk or not as much of that. So.
Dan?
There was a question that came up as you were explaining, because what I really was getting to for the benefit of the cameras is in our one-on-ones, you had mentioned a total effect, a net effect of about 200,000.
Yep.
Some straight out cuts, right? Just straight up line item cuts and cost reductions, and others savings through shifting or et cetera, et cetera. The discussion we could have had maybe back in June when we started this was looking at the utility franchise fee, and with all of these required shifts now, that sort of changed the dynamics of the funds, where they're going. But we have a very clear policy on what the utility franchise fee going into the facilities fund can be used for, and it's strictly all facilities. Are we now with post shifts, are we adequately funding the facilities? And if not, because I see you shake your head, then what should we be talking about in addressing the utility franchise fee, and how soon should we talk about that? Because of it's on a different cycle than our levy budget, right?
Yeah.
It's governed differently, a different fund.
Okay.
So what would you suggest that we do if we were going to have that discussion? When should we have it?
Yeah, Dana, because
Ma-
we've talked about it and it's going into the all-day work
I
session.
was just gonna say that, Madam Mayor, it's already scheduled to go on our all-day work session to talk about if council has the appetite to want to look at an increase in franchise fees. That we could do that in 2019, and we could do
Yeah.
that as soon as council were to give us direction. And should council want to do that, it's a several-month process to get through.
Yeah.
There you go.
To do all of they have to pull all of the calculations on all the residents and also on the businesses and all of that.
There's also a notification process that
Yeah.
goes along with that.
And so all of that takes, and that's the conversation we have to have during the all-day work session, and then direct staff. Bill?
yeah, since I won't comment, I'll pass.
Okay.
Thanks.
Kelly?
I would just add too that you've got the other variable in play is the host fee. So
Yeah.
we don't know that the host fee is, if you expand the landfill and the capacity of the landfill, then the host fee goes back up, and then
Yeah.
that can fund that fund.
And right now, we don't have any control over any of that except the information we have now. Because there are other departments of the state that have to make their decision. And this is out 2 or 3 years out.
Yes.
And so,
Long way out.
let's just talk about what we can control. We can't control any of that stuff.
Yes, that's a
And-
ways out, unfortunately.
Yeah. So control what we can, and when things change, then we can make some decisions. But right now, we know what we have in front of us. Okay? Any more questions? Okay, thank you. Bill, do you have anything to report?
No.
Dan?
Ames Commission had their work session the other day. They're gonna come to us with a recommendation in January. They're working through it right now. And Dakota Broadband meets tomorrow. 35's been canceled, so we won't meet until December with that one.
Or
That's it.
probably January when
Or
the.
January,
Yeah.
that's possible, but
Yeah.
I think we're gonna have a December meeting though.
Yeah, okay, Kara? Okay, Dan?
Were you at the October I-35? Or I know Ryan sent me notes, but I thought that was one that you couldn't be at either.
No, I think I
That
was.
neither one of us.
Yeah, I was there.
You were there.
I was sitting with Brian.
Yeah, that's correct.
So you probably gave an update last month on, I don't remember.
It was the same update that 35 is going to be a mess for 4.5 years.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
we've been getting pretty much on a monthly basis.
MBTA, why does this keep jumping down? I don't know if anybody here knows this, but the number one complaint from a study is the Marquette Avenue logjam in downtown. It's the number one complaint probably for every opt-out and the Metro Transit. They showed the street and how many buses come through there in morning and evening rush
That's
hour.
the congestion that's going on right now.
Oh, no, this has nothing to
Yeah.
do with, this is just because in the morning and in the evening, the amount of buses
Yeah.
trying to queue in
Yeah,
on Market
on
Avenue
Marquette.
with all of their assigned stops.
Yeah.
And the delays, it ends up stacking up 2 and 3 buses deep trying to take a spot for one bus. And then a short distance is the next,
Yeah.
opt-out. And so the whole street becomes a massive bus congestion of trying to get in and out in the
Yeah,
morning and the
that's-
evening. And it causes a lot of delays. It's the number one complaint from
Riders.
our riders. And so it was an interesting study result. I didn't realize that downtown was, it was really all condensed onto one
Yeah,
street.
onto one street.
And one of
it
the
was-
considerations that and I had just made a suggestion, why is it done that way? Well, it was planned, right? So
Yeah.
it's where we decided that's going to be the bus terminal for all the opt-outs and Metro Transit for pickups and drop-offs in downtown. And so you go 3 blocks to the east, and there's lots of opportunity to break it up. I mean, when the original plan was designed many, many years ago, it might have made sense, but it's a little overtaxing one street to handle all of those buses from all the various opt-outs plus Metro Transit in the morning and evening rush hour. It's quite there's probably a time-lapse video somewhere on YouTube that would be hilarious to watch. Ridership survey, we had a 2017 numbers, Burnsville Transit Station, the car counts are down 9% this year versus last year, which seemed odd because our Burnsville Transit ramp is always generally overflowing. And but 27 was actually an anomaly jump in numbers, and so they're really kind of back down to what would have been more normal for 2018. But the key thing was there was a 25-cent fare increase, and when we reviewed and voted on that fare increase, there was an expected 3% drop based on all historical data. With a 25% or 25-cent fare increase, it results generally in a 3% drop. But we have only seen a 1.6% drop in ridership. So about half of what the anticipated drop was. So good news, really, the ridership is stronger even with a 25-cent fare increase. And certainly some of that more recently, this is, all of 2018, and that construction didn't necessarily start in January, but it's definitely dominated the year. And so hopefully we'll continually have good, strong ridership during this 4.5-year fiasco of construction into downtown. That's it.
Okay. Our Savage Burnsville partnership meeting went very well. A lot of it had to do with infrastructure, water, who's doing what, what's happened with the meter project, and we did very well in terms of our implementation, and thank you, Dana, for heading up that project. And Savage, everybody, learned a great deal from us and did a good job. Is there anything else from that? Oh, and then we talked to them about the trail.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was really good.
yeah,
They had concern about an extra 250 feet on the BSLI landfill.
yeah.
They were unaware of that, so,
Yeah.
but they would get notified.
So we also talked with them about
Can they see it from Savage?
Kramer Mining and Materials and Shifting,
Not the residents.
which means that
Cargill can.
they may experience some vibration energy, so they said, well, they'll be watching for that. We also talked to them about Waste Management wanting to increase their height to the height of Buck Hill, and it would be 22 years. And they want to make sure that they comment on that. Because it's going to affect them, because it's going to be right on the border. So, and we do that, well, they can comment during the environmental impact study.
Exactly.
And so they know that they can do that. So, but they understand, but they want to make sure that their residents are aware, one, of what that height's going to be, and the other is that when Kramer Mining and Material shift their boundary and start to blast, and the energy that's going to cause vibrations towards Savage, depending. So those were the critical items in terms of our report. And then they talked about they're still working on Highway 13 and that alternative interchange on the north side. And it's not Chowan. Chowan is on our side, but the one that's
Dakota Yosemite.
past Lynn. Yeah. So that's what went on. That's what was reported on the Savage Burnsville, and then on the Convention and Visitors Bureau we meet on Thursday, but I reported last time that we're still working on our strategic plan. It takes time because we only meet for an hour. We now scheduled for 2 hours to try and plow through all of that. And that's it.
One last note, the congestion in Marquette was so bad, the board decided to take a little tour. So we're going to do a evening rush hour run into downtown and back and go through the whole Marquette mess.
Okay. Dana, is there anything else from staff?
Nothing.
Okay. Michelle,
Thank
you're good. And congratulations to Michelle and her team on a very well-run election. Thank you. I know it was a huge job, and you had a lot of training with everybody having to learn the e-poll pads. And then you lost some folks because they were afraid of it. But you did pick up some who were okay with learning new technology.
Mm-hmm. We were really surprised that some of the people who originally thought that it would be very difficult for them to do realized it wasn't that difficult and made their jobs a little more fun and easier.
Yeah, and I want to say that your new setup for early voting really went smooth because I watched that, and it was also well secured.
Mm-hmm. The improved workflow did help that with the crowds.
Yeah, very good. So I went downstairs and then I saw these trash bins. And I said, well, Michelle, people can walk through you. We'll move it. She says, no, don't move it. That's a barrier, so they don't,
We don't want them to go through that way.
we don't want them to come through. Oh, okay. I was just thinking their flow would be a lot better. And she says, no, we're making it difficult for them to walk around. They have to walk around. Oh, okay.
They can't
Now I
skip the line.
understand. Yeah, but well done,
Thank
well done. I did not hear anything except we did get the one, you had one judge that wanted more technology on your equipment. All costs money.
Yes, oh, right.
Yeah, do you remember?
On the,
Voodoo.
on the
Yeah.
assisted votive device, yes, and that's something that, we'll have to work out with the
With the county.
election vendors and the legislators as to
Yeah.
what's required by the technology,
Yeah, because don't you have to have the same throughout the whole state then?
through the county.
Yeah, okay. All right, and that's it. Ryan, anything else from you? Kelly, you have anything else?
No, I don't.
If not, we stand adjourned by acclamation. Thank you.